Belgium's King Philippe returned a traditional mask to Democratic Republic of Congo on Wednesday. It was, he said, a symbolic gesture in a country where many remain angry at Belgium's failure to apologise for decades of brutal colonial rule.
I wanted, during our visit at the National Museum and in your presence, to return to you this exceptional work in order to allow Congolese to discover and admire it.
The initiation mask of the Suku people has been held for decades at Belgium's Royal Museum for Central Africa. It was offered to Congo's National Museum in Kinshasa in what the monarch called an indefinite loan.
It marks the symbolic beginning of the reinforcement of the cultural collaboration between Belgium and Congo.
By some estimates, killings, famine and disease killed up to 10 million Congolese people in just the first 23 years of Belgium's 75-year rule, a period in which King Leopold II claimed the country as his personal property. Perhaps most notoriously, villages that missed rubber collection quotas were made to provide severed hands instead. In 2020, Philippe became the first Belgian official to express regret for the suffering and humiliation inflicted on Congo. Addressing Parliament on Wednesday, Philippe reaffirmed his deepest regrets for those wounds of the past, but he stopped short of saying sorry. Some Congolese are demanding an official apology during the first visit of his reign to the country. Congo's President Félix Tshisekedi and many other politicians have, however, enthusiastically welcomed the royal visit. So too some residents, who hope it will bring investment and a renewed focus on conflict in the east of the country.
Advocate Sipho Mantula is a Pan-African affairs analyst and human rights activist. He joins us now to speak about this visit. A landmark visit, Advocate Mantula has been dubbed, and as we've mentioned just now, that there has been jubilation in some quarters in the Democratic Republic of Congo, while others are calling for an apology. And there's a huge difference between expressing regret and apologizing for the brutal past and the role that Belgium played in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
No, correct. This is a piece of Jumbo Africa, and good evening to your viewers of the globe. I think if we have to give the context of this visit, I looked at various dates, timelines, even from that insert that you were playing, but as we were saying, historic trip that has been held back due to COVID-19 since 2020. But for some of us, we see that the month of June is important for the Congolese and July for two reasons. This is almost 62 years of the Congo independence in 1960. And when you look back again, their relations since 1960, since the Berlin Conference, have never been a good relation, even post the era of Joseph Kabila, if one has to come to the 21st century. But let me go back quickly again, why this is important, this visit. The return of the tooth of Patrice Emery Lumumba, that was killed in a brutal manner. The Pan-African anti-colonial struggle activist was killed in 1961, just after making that historic speech on the 30th of June 1960 about the former colonizer. So some of us, we see this visit as if it is a cohabitation once more of the colonized and the colonizer. I see Belgium coming here, and as you were saying earlier, is the reparation and the question of apology, will it come in the mouth of the king and his entourage and the government? And for me, again, I'm anticipating when he's meeting with the young people in Lubumbashi, talking to the university students, and I will urge them to ask him those questions that are very difficult, not very comfortable questions about reparation, about the apology, and about how why Lumumba was brutally assassinated.
And let's talk about that. As you say, the timing, we know that later this month, the remains of Patrice Lumumba will be taken back to the Democratic Republic of Congo in an attempted coup and assassination, which was supported by Belgium. Do you think he will likely address that?
No, definitely, Sister Tshepiso. I think what we've seen from him compared to other previous kings, and remember from his father's late visit to the DRC in 2010, one might assume that what he said in 2020 might come back to haunt him if he has to be committed to what he said today when he was returning the cultural artifacts. And I wanted to use a case study of DRC Congo with what we saw in Rwanda and France, what we see between Germany and Namibia. So our relation with our colonizer, whether it's a monarchy or president, it is the issue of what your insert is saying, development, change. Will it bring change to the millions of Congolese who have been looted their natural resources, they've been raped, they've been maimed and killed for many years? Beyond Lumumba, this is a country, remember, that we always say the first African World War, it was in the DRC in 1998. And South Africa played a critical role in the inter-Congolese dialogue.
The king being an ancestor of King Leopold II, who made his own personal fortunes on the back of the Congolese, not only through brutality by forced quotas of rubber and ivory, and that, as I mentioned, using torture and murder to get it. I mean, yes, you can go ahead.
No. I wanted to say what is important again. Another timeline, 14 years. Remember when Kabila engaged with the Belgians? These issues that you are raising, they wanted to be very diplomatic on them. They wanted to be soft on them because Kabila raised that the human rights violation that Congo went through compared to what they are raising against him, and the elections of 2016, once more, Kabila raised it against them. Those are the issues that have came up, if I can be honest with you, that the legacy of his ancestors will remain to haunt him because we cannot separate what his ancestors has done to the millions of Congolese. What I vividly still remember when I went to Congo, Sister Tshepiso, in 2006 in Goma. I remember the issue of that book of how Congo was, the issue of in the heart of darkness of the Congo. You see that book, if you read it, you see how the genocide of Congo, it's not the genocide of Rwanda of 1994 only, but the genocide began in the Berlin Conference. When the Berlin Conference was the diplomats and the lawyers of Europe to have Africa, Congo, for it to be declared Belgian Congo. That's how it came. And we can implicate and complicate France as well. At some point, Belgium left Congo and France came in. Hence, you find even the Congolese, the colonized Congolese, they still have what I called sympathetic dual citizenship with their former colonizer, Belgium. And it is a normal, I think, thing of a colonizer that he still capture you with his culture, with his language, the material resources. And that's how Tshisekedi, I can tell you, he's very soft to the king. Some of us, if we were close to Tshisekedi, would have said the king must commit on reparation and apology.
And this is the point that I was talking about. You were saying what would have been a good outcome of this is commitment on economic development. And I wanted to find out if Belgium can commit to this, because it itself inculcated that systemic economic exploitation. And if we're to talk about the relationship between the colonizer and colonized, France, for instance, we know that to this day there are French former colonies who are still paying taxes over to France in some form or the other. So can we ask Belgium to be the steward of that, of economic development in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which it plundered? While it was preaching anti-slavery in Europe, it was promoting that in the DRC itself.
No, correct. What you are raising is very important, that even if we ask them to be the new investors, but they have benefited out of the pillaging of Congo since the Berlin Conference, and even today again. Because when you talk of Congo, in the Africa geopolitics, Congo remains what Africa today is going through, Sister Tsepiso, of the looting and the pillaging of natural resources of the Congo. All the gadgets we are talking about of the fourth industrial revolution lies in the soil of DRC Congo. When we talk of DRC Congo, of the electricity and the energy capacity of the continent, we talk of the Congo Inga Dam project. But when you talk of the Belgians, to say what can they offer back to the Congolese, it's back to the government of DRC to start to say, but our infrastructure, youth development, issues of corruption, because they were involved even during the era of Kabila. They were complicated in some of the deals of mining. So one can look at, maybe it is high time that Tshisekedi must push the issue of Africa free trade, that Belgium under reparation can pay something to the Congolese. But a painful aspect, Sister Tsepiso, is that you still, like I've said, you still have loyalty of the colonized to the colonizer. It is only the will of the people of Congo, as they were lamenting that even the previous visits of the kings of Belgium to Congo, they failed to can acknowledge the atrocities that happened, and they are not trying to close the chapter. Retaining of cultural artifacts, if one goes to it, so there's a cultural and the commodity value on it. We should not undermine the return of cultural artifacts. There is an economic value of it, but it's how do we quantify it? The issues of reparation, again, how do we quantify it? And that's why I think they will be stuck, not to be stuck with the past, but look at the present and the future of the Congolese. Hence, I used those case studies of Rwanda and France. And you have said it earlier, the French in the Sahel, the same dilemma that you are in.
And I mean, you're also absolutely right in saying we shouldn't undermine the importance of the return of these cultural artifacts, that the currency isn't only in commercial value, but it's also an agency, isn't it? And this is precisely why Belgium, I understand that this is an ongoing debate in Parliament, but there is a new draft law that'll pave the way for some of these objects to be returned back to the Democratic Republic of Congo. But surely in tandem, Belgium can start speaking about reparations, legalizing or preparing some draft legal framework for reparations.
No, correct. I fully agree with you. But one text that I saw from the government or from the king, when he said the Congolese should allow the return of the mask, what we call the Suku people, he says they should discover and admire it. Very problematic. Why should they admire something that was stolen from them? They should say, but you have benefited illegally. It was unjustified enrichment. And that's what the AU has been pursuing on this question of return of cultural artifacts broadly continental. I know case studies from Ethiopia. They got some of the artifacts from Italy. You have the Benin case study. You have West Africa that has been pursuing return of, including South Africa too. And that is not only in Belgium, Sister Tsepiso. I think all the Berlin Conference colonizers, they owe Africa the return of these goods with the values that they carried when they stole them. And that's how we have left Europe on cultural issues, on diplomacy to engage on it. Because I see this visit not being politically or culturally or economically, but as they say, reconciliation, but at the same time, I see it as a moment of reparation and a moment of apology. Give apology where it is due.
So just in terms of how Africa can advance its soft power within this conversation that we're having, how can Belgium itself use this visit as exemplary and be a leader of turning this stained history around?
You know what, I think for the EU countries, this will be a learning curve, what Belgium is beginning to do. And I think France as well has been doing the same. But let's give them the benefit of doubt, even if I still being not optimistic and I'm not pessimistic again, but I'm very cautious that I don't put praises to my former colonizer easily, when the future generation is waiting for answers. And like you are saying, I think for Africa and for the continent, for the regional bodies, is to understand the value of their cultural resources, their cultural artifacts, and to understand the history of our former colonizers, that even if when they even come back and they want reconciliation, it must be on the footing of equal rights and justice. It must be on the equal footing of giving testimony, confessing of what they have done, and even acknowledging what they have done and paying those damages, because that's where we are stuck with the past at some point. But we will want to move forward, and like you are saying, it is important for the EU states to start to look at Africa as an equal partner and not ask Africa to start begging from them. It's the same question that you are talking on your TV all the time, so of the Ukraine conflict, that we are poor, there is no food, we are having crisis of oil, but we know that it's been controlled from somewhere. We know that the dynamics that I raised earlier, that Congo, it carries many metals, many minerals, and Europe, their appetite does not cease. There's what I always call consistent appetite of the former colonizer to its colonized territories. It still continue. Even if we are no more, it will continue.
Oh, thank you so much for speaking to us, sharing your insights. Advocate Sipho Mantula, Pan-Africanist and political expert today on African affairs.